My sister's future was a blue chip stock. My parents invested everything in her finance MBA without a second thought. Mine was just a hobby. Your sister's career builds wealth, my father said, pushing my architectural thesis budget back across the table. Yours builds models. My mother added the final blow, her voice soft with pity. You're a resourceful girl, Clara. You'll figure it out in that moment. I wasn't their daughter. I was just a line item they had decided to cut. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special. And we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. My name is Clara Evans, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been defined by a 4-minute gap. That was the time that separated my birth from my sister, Olivia's, to the world. We were twins, two halves of a whole. But in the quiet, unspoken language of our family, those 4 minutes might as well have been a lifetime. Olivia was born first. And with that, she seemed to have claimed the lifetime supply of my parents' praise and attention. From our earliest days, the difference in their treatment was a tangible thing, an invisible wall between us. Olivia was the delicate porcelain doll, handled with care and constant admiration. I was the sturdy wooden toy, expected to withstand any fall without complaint. I remember one afternoon when we were about 7. I spent hours meticulously constructing a castle out of Legos, complete with towers and a functioning drawbridge. I was immensely proud. But when Olivia came over to see it, she tripped and the entire structure crumbled. She immediately burst into tears, and my parents rushed in. My mother scooped Olivia into her arms, cooing that it was just an accident, while my father looked at the ruin and then at me. "You've always been good at building, Clara," he said, not with anger, but with a casual dismissiveness. "You can just make another one." There was no praise for my work, only an expectation of my resilience. This pattern followed us through school, becoming more pronounced with each passing year. Our family's world revolved around practicality and tangible success, and Olivia fit that mold perfectly. She excelled in math and economics, subjects my parents understood and valued. Her B+ in an advanced calculus class was celebrated with a fancy dinner, a testament to her hard work in a meaningful field. My straight A's in art, design, and literature, however, were met with a simple nod. "Well, that sort of thing has always come naturally to you," my mother would say, as if my efforts were effortless and therefore less valuable. This dynamic was never clearer than at the annual high school science fair. Olivia presented a project on stock market trends, a flawless but formulaic analysis pulled from textbooks. My parents stood beside her display for an hour, beaming as she explained regression analysis to the judges. My project was a functional scale model of a passive solar home I had designed, complete with working ventilation and light shafts. I had spent months on it. My father glanced at it for a moment, tapped on the plexiglass roof, and said, "Very creative, honey," before heading back to Olivia's station to hear the results. Olivia won second place. My project, which won first place in the engineering category, was only mentioned in passing on the car ride home. My grandmother was the only one who saw things differently. She lived a few states away, so her visits were rare but precious. She would ignore the report cards and instead ask to see my sketchbook, her fingers tracing the lines of my drawings with a reverence no one else ever showed. "You don't just see things, Clara," she once told me, her voice a warm whisper. "You see how they could be." She was the one who gave me my first set of professional drafting pencils, a gift I treasured more than any dollar dress during one visit. She watched me sketch for nearly an hour in silence. Finally, she said, "Never let anyone convince you that the world you build on paper is less real than theirs. Sometimes It's more honest. Her words became a quiet mantra for me. But my grandmother's quiet validation was a flickering candle against the steady wind of my parents' pragmatism. As we neared high school graduation, the conversations about the future became constant and heavy with expectation. The path for Olivia was clear and brightly lit: a prestigious university, followed by a Master of Business Administration in finance. She was, in my father's words, the family's blue chip stock, a guaranteed return on investment. My path, a degree in architecture from the State University's respected but less glamorous design school, was seen as a winding dirt road, beautiful but leading nowhere profitable. The breaking point, the moment the unspoken rules were finally carved into stone, came during a cool evening in October. My father had called a family meeting at the dinner table, a rare and serious occasion. He cleared his throat and slid a thick envelope across the polished wood to Olivia. "We've taken care of it," he announced, his chest puffed with pride. "Your entire MBA program tuition, room and board, all of it. We want you to focus on your studies without any financial distractions." Olivia's smile was radiant, and my mother reached over to squeeze her hand, tears of joy in her eyes. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, but I clapped along with them, a hollow sound in the suddenly quiet room. After the congratulations died down, I took a deep breath. I had prepared a neat folder with the estimated cost for my final year's thesis project, a significant sum for specialized software, plotter printing, and high-quality model building materials. I slid it tentatively toward my father. "I was hoping we could talk about this as well," I began, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. He picked it up, his eyes scanning the numbers, his expression shifting from pride to impatience. He pushed the folder back to me. "Clara, we can't pour money into something so uncertain," he said flatly. "Your sister's career builds wealth. Yours builds, models." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. My mother then delivered the final blow. Her voice softened with a pity that felt worse than anger. "You're a resourceful girl, Clara," she said, placing her hand over mine. "You'll figure it out." In that moment, the world shifted. I was no longer a daughter with a different dream. I was a liability, a line item they had decided to cut. They hadn't just denied me financial support. They had officially declared my future a lost cause. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply nodded, pulled my folder back, and a quiet, unshakable resolve settled deep within me. I would no longer seek their approval. I would build my future myself, one brick at a time, until it was a structure so immense, so undeniable, that they would have no choice but to see it. Our college years unfolded in two parallel universes. Olivia thrived in the pristine, high-stakes world of her business school. My parents funded a stylish apartment for her near campus. Her weekends filled with networking events and study groups with future titans of industry. She was being groomed for success, and she wore the part beautifully. My universe was smaller, grittier. I lived in a cramped dorm room that always smelled faintly of wood glue and spray paint. My days were a grueling marathon of classes, followed by long evenings and weekends split between two jobs. My first job was as a barista on campus, a blur of steam wands and the constant call of names that weren't mine. The second was at a small architectural firm downtown, but not in a design role. I was the office assistant, the one who made coffee, sorted blueprints, and ran errands. I spent one entire winter break in the firm's dusty basement, digitizing hundreds of old blueprints that were crumbling at the edges. The senior partner who assigned the task never learned my name, just calling me the intern. It was humbling work, watching young architects do what I longed to do. But I absorbed everything. I studied the way they talked to clients, the way they organized their project files, the sheer discipline required to turn a drawing into a building. Every dollar I earned was meticulously budgeted, channeled directly into my education and the ever-growing costs of my projects. I remember one particularly difficult semester, where a required course demanded a software license that cost hundreds of dollars. I couldn't afford it, instead. I spent weeks teaching myself a free open source alternative that was notoriously difficult to use. I fell behind. My classmates, with their parent funded software, submitted sleek, perfect renderings while mine were clunky and took 3 times as long to generate. I had a moment of quiet breakdown in the empty studio at 3 a.m., surrounded by error messages, certain I would fail. But then I remembered my grandmother's words, and I took a deep breath, deleted the corrupted file, and started again. I passed the class, but the experience carved a new layer of determination into me. I rarely saw Olivia, but when we did cross paths in the university library, the gap between our lives was stark. She would look at my worn-out jeans and the dark circles under my eyes with a flicker of pity. "You look exhausted, Clara," she once commented, sipping her expensive latte. "Maybe you should manage your time better." I would just smile, a tight, weary expression that revealed nothing of the storm inside me. I didn't have the energy to explain that my time was managed down to the minute, a complex equation of survival and ambition. My solace was the design studio, the one place where I felt truly alive. And it was there that I met Professor Albright. He was a legend in the architecture department, a tough, brilliant man who saw straight through excuses and mediocrity. He didn't care about my family or my financial struggles. He cared only about the work. He was the first person since my grandmother to look at my designs and see not just lines on a page, but a distinct point of view. In our first one-on-one review, he tore my project apart, his red pen bleeding across my careful drawings. He called my concept derivative and emotionally vacant. I left his office devastated, thinking of dropping out. But at the end of his critique, he had simply said, "You're better than this, Evans. Stop designing what you think we want to see and design something you believe in." That critique changed everything. For my final thesis project, Professor Albright encouraged me to think bigger than a single building. He urged me to tackle a real-world problem. I chose to design a new public library for the underserved Northwood District, a project that combined my love for community spaces with a complex architectural challenge. I poured my entire being into it. It became more than a requirement for graduation. It was the culmination of every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every quiet moment of doubt. I called my mother once, buzzing with excitement after a breakthrough in the design. "That's nice, dear," she said, her voice distracted. "Oh, listen, Olivia just got a final internship offer from Barclays. Isn't that wonderful?" The familiar sting of disappointment was sharp, but I pushed it down. Her validation no longer mattered. Only the work mattered. As the end of the year approached, the entire school was abuzz about the annual architectural showcase. It was the most important event of the year, a gala where graduating students presented their thesis projects to a crowd of faculty, alumni, and partners from the city's top firms. The highest honor was the Chancellor's Medal for Architectural Innovation, a prize that all but guaranteed a graduate their picks of job offers. Unbeknownst to me, Professor Albright had submitted my Northwood Library project for the award. He later told me he didn't want the pressure to affect my work. All I knew was that I had to present my project as best I could. The final model alone cost nearly everything I had saved over the past year. I called home to invite my family. The hesitation on the other end of the line was palpable. "A student showcase, Clara. You know your father and I are very busy," my mother said. "Besides, Olivia's flying in that weekend. We wanted to celebrate her graduation." "It's on Friday evening," I said, keeping my voice even. "It would mean a lot to me." There was a heavy sigh, then a reluctant agreement. "Fine, we'll try to stop by for a little while." The conversation left me feeling hollow, but I was determined. Let them come. Let them see what a hobby looks like when it's forged in fire. The night of the showcase, the main hall was transformed. It wasn't a student fair. It was a sophisticated gala, with soft lighting, catered food, and the low hum of conversation from some of the most influential people in the city's architectural scene. My family arrived late, looking distinctly out of place. My father's business suit seemed stiff and out of place, and my mother clutched her purse like a shield. Olivia, ever polished in a designer dress, scanned the room with a look of bored condescension. I thought this was a school thing, she whispered to me. It looks like they spent a fortune. I didn't reply, just led them to my presentation board, my heart pounding against my ribs. The awards ceremony began. The dean of the School of Architecture took the stage to announce the winner of the Chancellor's Medal. He began by speaking about the role of architecture in shaping a city's soul. Then, he started describing the winning project without yet revealing the name. This year's winning design is not just a building, he said, his voice resonating through the hall. It is a promise to a community long overlooked. It is a design that is not only visionary in its use of sustainable materials and light, but deeply humane in its purpose. My breath caught in my throat. He was talking about my library. As the dean spoke, I saw a distinguished silver-haired man I instantly recognized as James Sterling, the founding partner of Sterling and Croft, the most prestigious firm in the city, make his way through the crowd toward my parents. He approached them just as the dean continued. A project of such maturity and vision that it has already been noticed by those who can make it a reality. My parents looked confused by the stranger's approach. Then, everything happened at once, on stage. The dean beamed. The Chancellor's Medal for Architectural Innovation goes to Clara Evans for her project, the Northwood Public Library. At the exact same moment, I saw Mr. Sterling extend his hand to my father. I was too far away to hear, but I could read the shock on their faces as he spoke. Later, I learned what he said. Mr. and Mrs. Evans James Sterling, I just wanted to congratulate you. Your daughter is a generational talent. We've not only acquired her thesis project for development, but we've also offered her a lead associate position at my firm, a role usually reserved for architects with a decade of experience. A spotlight hit me. The hall erupted in applause, and as I stood there, frozen for a second, I looked at my family. Their faces, illuminated by the spill of the spotlight, were utterly pale. It wasn't just surprise. It was a deep, bone-rattling shock, a horrifying collision of their private, dismissive narrative with a public, undeniable reality. The hobby they had written off, the models they had mocked, had just been validated and valued in a way they could have never conceived, right in front of their eyes. In the moments that followed, I was swept into a whirlwind. Professors hugged me, classmates congratulated me, and industry professionals pressed their business cards into my hand. Professor Albright gripped my shoulder, his eyes shining with pride. You earned every bit of this, Evans, he said gruffly. Mr. Sterling himself came over, his smile warm and genuine. Welcome to the firm, Clara, he said, shaking my hand. We have a lot of work to do. Through the crowd, I saw my family trying to make their way toward me. They looked like ghosts, pale and unsure. My mother reached me first, her hand fluttering nervously. Clara, she stammered, we had no idea. My father stood behind her, his mouth opening and closing but no words coming out. Olivia just stared, her perfect composure finally shattered, her expression an unreadable mix of disbelief and something that looked unnervingly like envy. Before they could say more, Mister? Sterling gently touched my elbow. Clara, I'd like to introduce you to the deputy mayor. She's very excited about Northwood. He guided me away, and I went without looking back, leaving them standing alone in the middle of the crowded room, a family adrift. A year later, the scent of fresh concrete and cut lumber had replaced the smell of wood glue in my life. I stood on the bustling construction site of the Northwood Public Library, my library, a hard hat on my head and a roll of blueprints under my arm. Seeing the foundation poured, the first steel beams rising against the sky, was a feeling of profound peace and accomplishment that no award could ever capture. My first few months at the firm had been a trial by fire, proving myself amongst architects with far more experience. But I had earned their respect. My life was my own, built on a foundation of my own making. My relationship with my family had become one of polite, carefully maintained distance. We spoke on holidays and birthdays, our conversations filled with safe, Superficial topics, they never mentioned the showcase again. It was a locked room in our family's history, a place none of us dared to enter. One afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was strained, laced with an anxiety I hadn't heard before. She told me Olivia was unhappy, that the grueling, high-pressure world of investment banking wasn't what she'd imagined. She had decided to pivot, to get into real estate investment with her boyfriend. Then came the real reason for her call. "Clara, dear," she began, her tone shifting to one of forced casualness. "I was just thinking, with your connection to Mr. Sterling, his firm works with all the big developers. It would be such a help if you could maybe introduce Olivia's boyfriend to him, just to, you know, open a door." I looked out across the construction site, at the tangible proof of what it meant to build something from nothing. I felt no anger, no satisfaction, only a quiet finality. "I'm sorry to hear Olivia's having a hard time," I said, my voice calm and even. "But her boyfriend is a resourceful man. I trust he'll figure it out." A stunned silence hung on the line before my mother finally whispered a goodbye and hung up. I slid the phone back into my pocket and turned back to my work. My family had taught me a valuable lesson about investment. They had invested in numbers on a spreadsheet, in a future that promised predictable returns. I had learned to invest in something else, entirely in concrete and steel, in light and space, and in the unwavering belief in my own worth. And that, I had discovered, was the only investment that was truly guaranteed to last a lifetime. It's a strange truth that sometimes the people who are meant to see us most clearly are the last to recognize our true worth. We can spend years waiting for their approval, hoping they'll see the fire we feel inside, only to learn that their validation was never the key to our own potential. The real journey begins when we stop asking for a seat at a table that was never set for us and, instead, start gathering the tools to build our own. Strength is forged in that silence, in the quiet hours of dedication to a craft that others may dismiss as a dream. The foundations we lay in the dark, brick by brick, are the ones that ultimately support the life we were meant to live. And in the end, the greatest success isn't about proving others wrong. It's the profound, unshakable peace that comes from proving yourself right. The quiet confidence of knowing that the most important project you will ever build is a life lived on your own terms. Thank you so much for being part of our story today. Every life has its own unique blueprint, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on this one in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications to join our community. We're so grateful to have you here and can't wait to share the next story with you.